Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'm the Compliance Evangelist. I'd like to welcome you to my January 2018 podcast series of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program. But first, a word about this month's sponsor, Conversant. Conversant brings a different kind of ethics and compliance solution to your organization. These days, business success demands something different, a corporate culture centered on integrity and ethical behavior. Conversant provides your teams with a centralized platform and automated processes that connect your business goals with your ethics and values. The result, a highly strategic program that drives ethics and values to the center of your business. Through the use of the Conversant Ethics Cloud platform, it gives you the choice of what you need according to your compliance program maturity. As your compliance program progresses on its ethical journey, Conversant can meet the needs of your requirements with unified ease of use and all of your ethics compliance data in one place, increasing transparency and efficiency while reducing cost. If you have been following me over the past year, you know that I have gone on a one-year exploration of various components of a best practices compliance program. However, during this exploration, there were two very important documents released by the Department of Justice relating to a best practices compliance program. In February 2017, there was the Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs document, and in November 2017, there was the announcement of the new FCPA Corporate Enforcement Policy. Therefore, in this month of January, I'm going to lay out for you what should go into your best practices compliance program based upon the 10 hallmarks of an effective compliance program and these two documents. Over the next 31 days, I will be exploring the best way to more fully operationalize a compliance program using the most recent DOJ resources. I hope you will join me for the full 31 days as we engage in an exploration to a more effective compliance program. 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 11, what is effective compliance training? The communication of your anti-corruption compliance program is something that must be done on a regular basis to ensure its effectiveness. The 2012 FCPA guidance explains, compliance policies cannot work unless they are effectively communicated throughout a company. Accordingly, the DOJ and SEC will evaluate whether a company has taken steps to ensure that relevant policies and procedures have been communicated throughout the organization, including periodic training and certification for all employees, directors, officers, and where appropriate, agents and business partners. One of the key goals for any FCPA compliance program is to train employees in awareness and understanding of the FCPA, your specific company compliance program, and to create and foster a culture of compliance. Beginning in the fall of 2016 with the announcement of the FCPA pilot program, the Department of Justice began to think about whether you have determined the effectiveness of your training. They continued with the 2012 Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs, where they asked the question, how has the company measured the effectiveness of training? The point has bedeviled many compliance practitioners, yet is now a key metric for the government in evaluating compliance training. Also raised in the evaluation was the focus of your training program, where the DOJ inquired into whether the training was tailored for the audience. The evaluation in Prong 6, Training and Communications, asked in part, under risk-based training, what training have employees in relevant control functions received? Has the company tailored training for high-risk and control employees that address the risks in the area where the misconduct occurred? And then what analysis has the company undertaken to determine who should be trained and on what subjects? This new prong, or new series of questions, I should say, adds two requirements. The first is that you must assess your employees for risk to determine the type of training you might need to deliver. This means you should risk rank your employees. Obviously, the sales force would have the highest risk, but there may be others deserving of high-risk training as well. From your risk ranking, you will need to develop tailored training for the risks those employees face. The key going forward is that you have a thoughtfully created your compliance training program, not only in design, but who receives it, coupled with back-end determination of effectiveness. Finally, all of this must be documented. Under form, content, and effectiveness of training, the following questions are raised in the evaluation. Has the training been offered in the form and language appropriate for the intended audience? And then once again, to reiterate, how has the company measured the effectiveness of the training? Most companies have not considered this issue, the effectiveness of training. I would suggest you start at the beginning of your evaluation and move outward. This means starting with your audience, which many companies tend to overlook. You should determine that all senior management and company board members have attended compliance training. You should review documentation of attendance and confirm that attendance. Make your department or group leaders accountable for attendance for their direct reports. And so on down the chain. Evidence of training is important to create an audit trail for any internal or external audit of your compliance program. One of the key goals is to have employees understand your compliance program. So what are some of the things that you can do to help determine the effectiveness of your training? Well, there are 4 areas that I have taken from Joel Smith's seminal work on taking a look at training ROI. And I've adapted this for effectiveness. Number 1, figure out what you want to measure. Before you ever train an employee, you should have this goal in mind. What actions do you want employees to take? What risks do you want them to avoid? In compliance training, you want them to avoid non-ethical and non-compliant actions which would lead to potential violations. Your goal is to train your employees to follow your code of conduct and your compliance program policy and procedures so you avoid liability relating to these actions. 2, were employees satisfied with your training and what is their engagement? The next step is to get a sense of whether employees feel that the training you provided is relevant and targeted to their job. If it's not targeted, employees will not likely be committed to changing any risky behavior. One way to obtain such data is through post-training surveys. This can give you insight in determining if employees thought the training was beneficial and effective in answering their questions and concerns. Number 3, did the employees actually learn anything? A critical part of any employee training is the assessment. You must know whether they actually learned anything during the training. You can collect the data in a number of ways, but for compliance training, the best way is to measure pre- and post-training understanding over time. Basically, each time you train an employee, measure comprehension both before and after the training. And then, of course, number 4, as Jay Martin would say, execution is where the rubber hits the road. Are employees applying the training? A survey should be used to determine employee application and their implementation of the training topics. To do so, you must conduct surveys to understand whether they have ceased engaging in certain risky behavior or, better yet, understand how to conduct themselves in certain risky situations. These surveys can provide a good sense of whether the training has been effective. The beauty of using such surveys is it provides feedback not on simply the compliance training to determine effectiveness, but on a much broader variety of areas for your compliance program. These surveys can provide critical information on the state of your compliance program and provide substantive feedback for further inclusion back into your compliance program. Testing your program using that information in a feedback loop is a key component in any best practices compliance program. The importance of determining effectiveness in the evaluation of your ethics and compliance program is now enshrined in the DOJ's evaluation of corporate compliance programs. The evaluation is the first formal step taken by the DOJ to demonstrate it wants to see the effectiveness of your compliance program. This is something many chief compliance officers and compliance professionals struggle with to this day. But the simple guidelines suggested here and the more robust assessment you make will start to fulfill the evaluation's requirements going forward. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Number 1, you must demonstrate you have measured the effectiveness of your compliance program. 2, the DOJ is clearly moving to requiring a demonstration of effectiveness, so how are you going to document it? And 3, you should be moving towards this model to fully validate the operationalization of your compliance program going forward. This is Tom Fox. I hope you've enjoyed Day 12 of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow for Day 12, Financial Incentives for Compliance. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program, sponsored by Conversant. I hope you will join me tomorrow and indeed for the entire 31 days in January while I will be exploring the best way to more fully operationalize your compliance program using the most recent resources the Department of Justice has communicated to us, the Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs, and the new FCPA Corporate Enforcement Policy. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening. 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.